is war inevitable between India and Pakistan in the next 5 to 10 years?
Not sure if it's inevitable per se, and I hope it's not. But I think what it seems the experts are saying is that what happened this time, in a way, the escalator ladder has been climbed, and the Indian Prime Minister sort of said that we have not called, it's not an end to the operation, it's a pause to the operation. So if you think of the sequence of events which happened from 2016, when India first sort of, as a policy, said that we are happy to go into Pakistan, either in Kashmir or and this time it was even outside Kashmir, that we would take out terrorist infrastructure. It first started with a surgical strike across the border by ground troops in 2016. In 2019, it went to an actual airstrike on terrorist infrastructure. And in 2025, it's moved up to airstrikes and missile strikes, including trying to hit Pakistan bases. So every step of, he has gone up to the escalator ladder. And so if there is, God forbid, and I think none of us would want any episode of that. And the Prime Minister said that, look, if every future act of terror is going to be considered as an act of war. So you will have to start essentially at, if you think that this is deterrence, and if there's another terror attack, well, the deterrence wasn't sufficient. So it has to be an even stronger message. So in that sense, from these statements, you think that, that is the message being sent out. And I think probably all of us should hope that, look, that's not in actual what's going to happen. Between two countries, the DGMOs will first talk, there'll be the pullback, and you'll essentially what's called reset the escalation ladder to zero. And, we can start from a sort of a none for none.
Do you believe they are terrorist attacks?
Yeah, the terrorist, if you define terrorism as targeting non-combatants,
Right, yeah.
Then clearly Pahalgam is a terrorist attack. There's been multiple such. I think what's been very alarming in the last 3-4 years in Jammu and Kashmir in India has been that there's been a lot of attacks on civilians. There's been rising incidences against the army, but there's also been targeting of civilians, especially outsiders who are not native to Jammu and Kashmir. So there's been attacks on laborers who have come from different parts of India to work on, say, infrastructure projects.
Tourists.
And this time it was tourists. It's not that it's never happened before. It's very rare, but it is terrorism straight out because you are targeting non-combatants. I don't think we can, there's any disagreements on that.
Yeah, there's innocent civilians. Yeah.
These are non-combatants. Simple. I think that was a big source of outrage, and I think the fact that it really shocked civil conscience is very evident in that even in Kashmir, there was a candlelight vigil. There was essentially a strike within Kashmir in protest of what happened in Pahalgam right after that day. It was a lot of outrage even within Kashmir.
The reason why I asked the initial question was, it seems to me, for the last 20 years, every 5 or 7 years, tensions rise. We all freak out. We all say, there's a nuclear war happening, and then tensions come back down, and then it happens again, and it comes back down. So do you think, at a certain point in time, they're going to have to confront the bigger reality if they don't solve the differences that they have?
Yeah, no, that is very correct. I think what's the tensions, again, through my lifetime, the tension has always been there. But I think there's something which has changed, again, at least in my lifetime. So starting from the, 90s, when, I've sort of slowly been following, or at least been aware of these events happening. This is probably the period from 2016 onwards. This has probably been a period when there has been very minimal dialogue between the two nations. What happened in the 90s was there would at least be efforts to have dialogue even after major incidences. So if you think of like 1998, you had the prime minister of Mr. Modi's party, in the first time they were in power. He started this bus diplomacy, goes to Lahore, meets the elder brother of the current prime minister of Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif. And after that, this war in Kargil happens. But then once Kargil dies down, General Musharraf comes to India. And they can't agree on anything, but he still comes to India. He even goes to his his childhood home in Delhi. He has this very emotional reunion with, I think, the lady who would take care of him as a child. Goes to Agra, but then nothing happens. He goes back. The parliament attack happens. Both countries mobilize, but then right before elections, Prime Minister Vajpayee makes another effort at Pakistan. The Indian cricket team goes to Pakistan, and then you have this bonhomie of India-Pakistan relations, which gets disrupted in 2008 with this. But then it keeps going to the extent that Prime Minister Modi turns up unannounced in 2015
in Pakistan
at Nawaz Sharif's birthday.
Right.
But then there's
kind of wild.
Yeah, then there's been you just show up. Party. Right? I mean, this is apparently a very tough right-wing, majoritarian, no-nonsense leader.
Yeah.
But I think what's concerning is that then there's been almost a complete freeze. And certain things, which, for instance, India and Pakistan, even on sort of the one of the biggest things two things they probably share in common, at least North India, is one is cricket, the other is Bollywood. Now, those have also been suspended.
Right.
In the 90s, India and Pakistan never played cricket or rarely played in each other's country, but they would play in Sharjah. They would play all the time in Sharjah. They even played 3 tours in Canada.
Really? In Canada?
Yeah, Canada. There was called the Sahara Friendship Cup.
Wow.
In 96, 97, 98. 3 editions of it happened.
Wow.
In Canada, in Toronto. Because, they won't play in each other's countries, but at least they went and played abroad. That is gone. And there's every time there is this, this time India just refused to play in Pakistan, just complete, and in an ICC event. That didn't happen in the 90s. Then, similarly, like, Bollywood actors are just, or Bollywood is in a way just shunning Pakistani artists, which again was not as
prevalent.
This much hostility was not there. So I think the dialogues have calmed down a lot, which is concerning, because then how do you want to, how can you move forward?
We were talking about this briefly a couple weeks ago. I think it's part of the reason why is because extremism in both countries have risen, and it seems to me that people that had the most extreme views in both countries are in positions of power, and so nothing really is getting done. Do you agree that it's because of these extremist ideals in both countries, or is it just a natural phenomenon of not talking to your neighbor?
So domestic politics, of course, has a role, especially, I think, and that's very true in India, because, for instance, in 2019, the Prime Minister Modi, who was up for re-election, got a lot of political mileage out of Balakot. The strikes he ordered.
What was Balakot for?
This was the strikes he ordered after the 2019 terrorist attack in Pulwama, where I think about 30 CRPF troops were killed. He ordered these strikes, and that was when the following Imran Khan was Prime Minister. The following day, one of India's planes got shot down. The pilot was captured. But he drew a lot of mileage, and if I remember correctly, he sort of said that he essentially appealed to the young voters of the country and said, a lot of first-time voters, can I request you to give your first vote for the armed forces of the country? That was essentially his messaging, and this whole thing of we can actually hit terrorists in their homes, and we'll not take this lying down. So there's political mileage, but there's an interesting counterpoint to this as well. When this is drawn from this, I remember there was this interview by this person called Shekhar Gupta in India, who was a very senior journalist. He would do these things called walk the talk, and he did this interview with kind of what somebody can be called as Mr. Modi's political mentor, Mr. L.K. Advani, who was once Deputy Prime Minister of India under Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And, I think Shekhar Gupta opens his interview asking that, are you surprised that some of the most, in some ways, the resumption of India-Pakistan ties in the 90s came under a BJP government. And he said, I'm not surprised one bit, because I felt that the BJP government is serious about solving this issue. And in some ways, if you think of it, a right-wing government will be less susceptible to political backlash of selling out to Pakistan. A right-wing government will be not like they have in that way, like, if it's not, or if it's a non-right-wing government like a Congress government, if they strike a deal with Pakistan, it's very easy for the right wing to target them as being soft on Pakistan. But it's much harder if today Mr. Modi decides to open up relations with Pakistan, which say Mr. Vajpayee did in 2003 after the parliament attack, 1.5 years later. And there was a full mobilization of the army at that time. He in fact used this term, I believe. He told the army that this will be a fight to the finish. It was almost like, and there was this huge mobilization of the army for a year and a half, and almost a stare down at the border. But he opens up in 2003. He probably had more credibility to do that than, say, a Congressman Manmohan Singh would have had. So in that way, it's also an opportunity, because, again, they are less susceptible of being selling out. It's harder to critique that.
Because you can compare that to America as well. Like, Donald Trump would be less susceptible to criticism that he's selling out American interests when his entire motto is "Make America Great Again."
Yeah. So
right-wing governments have that inherent power.
They have that advantage. They can portray it, because a lot
of
the
they're
times,
less patriotic. It's
because a lot of times, a lot of international relations, you also have to sell it back to your country.
Right.
You will have to sell those to your country as well, because if your domestic constituents become very unhappy, it's hard to carry. You have to carry your nation along.
Do you think both countries struggled to sell this war to their constituents this time around?
No, I think it's. So I'm going to quote this person called Sushant Singh, who is I think right now in Yale I think he's a postdoctoral scholar or something in Yale. He was in the military, and he's a sort of a defense analyst. I think he said, and it's true. I think the first part I completely agree. Both countries have done an amazing job at selling this, whatever happened in those 5 days, as a glorious military victory. In some ways, probably the biggest beneficiary of this whole thing is General Asim Munir, who recently got promoted to a field marshal.
Right, which is insane. It's only been done twice in the country.
Who it seems probably was a pretty, and I think the first one was self-appointed, with Ayub Khan.
Ayub Khan, right? That's right.
I think kind of appointed himself.
He did it when he was dictator.
So this is the civilian leadership.
It's the highest level that a military officer can hold.
And this is, I believe, he was a fairly unpopular general. Because he had issues with Imran Khan. So this person has suddenly become a national hero.
Right.
And, India has also claimed military victory about this. So in that sense, both countries have been able to convince their domestic constituents that we have a victory. And that probably made the ceasefire possible as well. If either country would have been seen as losing, they probably would have had to do one more round of operations to convince that, no, we didn't, we negotiated from a position of strength than a position of weakness.
So interesting.
In that sense, I think, again, if you think of international observers, like the New York Times, I think what they kind of say is that the first night, the Pakistan got sort of a bit of an upper hand in the air war, in that India might have lost some planes, and then but on the fourth night when India hit back, and I think. Some observers will believe that it was kind of a bit of anger at especially the Pakistan air defense system that caused that hitting back. The hits right deep into Pakistan, near Rawalpindi or Sargodha. Those were, if not, maybe the damage can be recovered quickly, but that's a strong message that, look, we can, no airfield of yours in many ways is out of range. And that was a strong message. And, and your missile interception system is not perfect. We can still, you probably could have caught a lot of our missiles, but we still, if we send enough, we can get through. And that's also a strong message in some ways sent out.
Right.
So I think that was kind of, if you think of military takeaways, it seems, if you think of international observers, that's probably where things ended up.
My fear was ballistic missiles were launched from, and India launched ballistic missiles, and then Pakistan, I think, launched counter missiles. That was the most concerning part for me. about the war.
Yeah, because India did use BrahMos missiles. So which are I mean,
Right, it's ballistic.
No,
And it's like-
those are I think what, traveling at Mach 5 or some speed
Right.
like that. So
Yeah.
of course,
I-
and if you think like at the end of the day, I think there was this article by Sushant Singh said this on an interview with the Hindu yesterday that if you think of the Soviet Union and the US, you had about 12-13 minutes. India, Pakistan, you don't even have that much time to respond because the distance,
So
like
close.
Lahore and
They're right
Amritsar
next
is
to each
40
other.
kilometers, right? Like
Yeah. So it's like literally immediate.
Yeah.
It's like seconds.
Which makes it an even bigger problem because I think that the real concern, I think, which is why the US stepped in,
Right.
is you sometimes can misinterpret certain statements or movements or intelligence
100%.
reports. And then, let's say you misinterpret intelligence report that, you just get that, okay, some military, weaponry X is being moved. And they were like, oh, wait, if it moves here, it can target this. Okay, let me take it out right away before they can do it. And then maybe you preempt something wrongly and you trigger off some chain. I think that's a real concern.